you to just, for a second, try and visualize the absolute limit of your world. But not your world today with, fiber optic cables and jet engines. I want you to think about the world as it existed more than 400 years ago. Imagine the Pacific Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
In the late 16th century, this wasn't just a big body of water. It was a void. It was this endless, terrifying expanse of blue that just ate. It swallowed ships whole.
It was the great unknown. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. To cross it wasn't just a commute. It was a roll of the dice with your own life.
Exactly.
We are talking about an era where the fastest that information could possibly travel was the speed of wind filling a canvas sail.
Yeah.
That's your top speed.
Right. So if you're in Manila, say in the Philippines, and you want to send a letter, a message, anything to Mexico City, you're not looking at days, not even weeks. You were looking at months of isolation, scurvy, storms. The distance we're talking about is roughly 9,000 nautical miles.
And just to put that in perspective for everyone, that is more than a third of the entire circumference of the Earth. So in 1593, that distance, it represented a totally insurmountable barrier of time. Physics, as they knew it, dictated that you could not be in two places at once. And you certainly couldn't bridge that gap in a human heartbeat.
And yet. That's why we're here today. We're here to talk about a story that claims to break every single one of those rules. We're looking at a very specific date, October 24, 1593. A soldier who is completely and utterly exhausted leans against a wall in Manila to rest his eyes. He closes them. And when he opens them, maybe seconds later, he's in Mexico City.
It's the ultimate impossible commute. I mean, think about it. One moment, you're breathing the humid, tropical, sticky air of Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
The next, you are shivering in the thin, cold, high-altitude air of North America. It's a total sensory shock.
And this isn't just some, ghost story we're pulling off a random blog. This is a legend with a surprisingly stubborn paper trail.
It really is.
We're talking about the legend of Gil Pérez. But unlike some of our usual spooky episodes where we might speculate wildly, today we have a different mission.
A different mission, yeah. We're going to unpack the history of the Spanish Empire at its peak, the brutal reality of the Manila galleon trade, and we're going to look at the specific historical texts that documented this event.
We're going to be historical detectives.
Exactly. We need to try and understand the mechanism of how news and apparently a physical human being traveled faster than physics should have allowed.
And we'll look at all of it. The theories, ranging from witchcraft to alien abduction, but we also have to look at the boring stuff.
The boring stuff is often the most interesting stuff.
It is. The logbooks, the trade winds, the fear. The very real fear of the Inquisition.
So, yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so let's get into it. October 1593. To understand why a soldier might, teleport, we first have to understand why he was so tired in the first place. What is happening in Manila at this exact moment in history?
Manila, in 1593, is a pressure cooker. You have to remember, the Philippines was a captaincy general of the Spanish Empire. It was literally the furthest outpost.
The edge of the world.
It's the edge of the known world for the Spanish crown, yeah. They were unbelievably isolated, surrounded by local populations that were, well, they weren't exactly thrilled to be colonized.
Right.
And they were constantly worried about invasions from other European powers, or, more immediately, from pirates.
And the man in charge of this whole tinderbox is the Governor General, Gómez Pérez Dasmariñas.
That's the man. Now, Dasmariñas, he wasn't the type to just sit behind a desk and push paper. He was ambitious. Very ambitious. He had his eyes on the Moluccas, what we know as the Spice Islands.
This is the era where spices were everything.
Everything. We're talking cloves and nutmeg being literally worth their weight in gold. He wanted to expand Spanish influence south to control that trade. So he organizes a massive expedition.
Okay, and this is where the tension really starts to build, right? An expedition needs ships.
And ships need rowers. Precisely. And this is a detail that often gets glossed over in the quick retellings of the Gil Pérez legend. The Spanish didn't just hire willing sailors for this kind of work.
It wasn't a job fair.
No, not at all. They conscripted labor. Specifically for this expedition, Dasmariñas had conscripted a huge number of Chinese rowers, they're often referred to in the text as sanglis, to man the oars of his flagship, the La Galera Capitana.
And conscripted it's a very polite way of saying forced labor, isn't it?
It's essentially slavery, yes. The conditions were brutal. These men were underpaid, if they were paid at all, likely mistreated, beaten, and forced to row a heavy war galley into extremely dangerous waters.
You can just feel the resentment building.
It must have been palpable. You have the Spanish officers on the deck, all armed and armored, looking down on hundreds of men who absolutely hate them. It's a recipe for disaster.
So the governor set sail. It's October 1593. Where's he going?
He's heading for the Moluccas. But they haven't gotten very far yet. At this point, they're still just off the coast of Batangas, which is south of Manila. So technically they're at sea, but they're still very close to the shore.
Okay.
And here is a really critical correction to the common legend. Most people who hear this story think the governor was killed in his palace in Manila.
Right. That's the movie version. The spooky murder in the governor's bedroom, candles flickering.
Exactly. But history tells us something different, something grittier. It happened on the water. On the night of October 23rd, the governor decided to sleep on the poop deck of the galley.
On the deck? Why not in his cabin?
The heat. I mean, it's the tropics. The cabins below deck would have been stifling, with no air circulation. So he sets up his quarters specifically on the open deck to try and catch a breeze. He thinks he's safe. He's got his guards.
But he wasn't.
He wasn't. The Chinese rowers had been planning a mutiny. This was their moment.
This is the catalyst for absolutely everything that follows.
It is. In the dead of night, they seize their chance. They rush the deck. It's violent, it's bloody, it's chaotic. They kill the Governor General Dasmariñas either while he's sleeping or just as he's waking up.
And not just him.
No, they kill most of the Spanish entourage on board. They take complete control of the flagship, the La Galera Capitana.
So the head of the entire colonial government is dead. The symbol of Spanish power is just gone, decapitated, literally or figuratively. The ship is lost. The mutineers, they just escape.
They escape, and news of this disaster reaches Manila shortly after. And you can imagine chaos erupts.
Total panic.
Complete panic in the walled city Intramuros. The governor is dead. The Sangli population is in revolt, or so they fear. The colony is leaderless, vulnerable. Everyone is terrified that this is the start of a massive uprising or an invasion from, say, China or Japan.
And into this chaos walks our protagonist.
Well, he's already there.
Right. Enter Gil Pérez.
He's a soldier of the Guardia Civil. Now, I want you to really try and place yourself in his boots. It's the morning of October 24th. He has almost certainly been up all night. The entire city is on high alert.
Adrenaline is pumping.
Adrenaline, fear. And he's standing guard at the Palacio del Gobernador, the governor's palace. He is wearing heavy armor, maybe a Morion helmet, a steel breastplate. In the crushing humidity of Manila, that is like wearing an oven.
We've all pulled all-nighters, but this is a different level. This is existential dread mixed with just soul-crushing physical exhaustion.
Exactly. And the sources, the old texts, describe him as feeling an overwhelming, almost supernatural dizziness. It's not just, I need a coffee tired. It's like a fugue state.
He's just done.
He's done. He leans against the palace wall. He needs to close his eyes for a second to stop the entire world from spinning.
I think this is a feeling a lot of us can actually relate to. That moment where reality gets a little slippery because you're so completely drained.
He closes his eyes. And this is the moment of the impossible. He shuts his eyes in Manila. He takes a breath. When he opens them, the air hitting his face isn't heavy with tropical moisture. It's crisp. It's dry. It's cold.
Let's pause on the sensory details here because the difference between Manila and Mexico City isn't just about the distance. It's altitude.
Huge difference.
Manila is at sea level. Mexico City is over 7,000 feet up.
It's a massive shock to the system. The light is different. It's that sharp, thin, high-altitude sunlight. The smell is different. There's no salt spray in the air, but maybe the smell of a dry lake bed and wood smoke from chimney.
He looks around.
And the architecture is completely shifted. The stones of the plaza are different. The buildings are grander in a different style.
He is standing in the Plaza Mayor. Today we call it the Zocalo. He is in the very heart of the Viceroyalty of New Spain, the center of Spanish power in the Americas.
And he is visibly, comically out of place. This is one of my favorite details in the story because it grounds the whole fantastical event in a very practical reality.
How so?
If you just teleported somewhere, you wouldn't just blend in. He is wearing the uniform of the Manila Palace Guards.
Which would have looked like what? How different would it have been?
Oh, it would be completely distinct. Different insignias, maybe lighter fabrics like linen suited for the tropics, or a specific livery, certain colors associated with Governor Dasmariñas' household.
Whereas the guards in Mexico City...
The guards in Mexico City serving Viceroy Luis de Velasco would have different colors, a different cut of fabric, maybe heavier wool. He looks like an actor who walked off the set of the wrong historical drama.
So naturally, he attracts attention. You can't just stand in the middle of the most important square in North America looking like that without someone coming over to ask him questions.
The local authorities approach him, and you have to imagine their confusion. They walk up to this guy, he's dazed, he's dressed weirdly. They ask him who he is.
And Gil Pérez.
He doesn't lie. He doesn't try to make up a story. He is totally bewildered himself. He just says, "My name is Gil Pérez. I am a soldier of the Guardia Civil. I was in Manila this morning."
I just love that he admits it. I was in Manila this morning. To the Mexican guards, that must have sounded like absolute gibberish.
It's like saying I was on the moon for breakfast.
Yeah.
It was physically, demonstrably impossible. But Gil keeps talking. He's trying to make sense of it himself. He says, "I don't know how I got here, but I know that Governor Gómez Pérez Dasmariñas is dead. He was assassinated by Chinese rowers last night."
He drops the intel. He gives them the headline news from tomorrow's paper. Or rather, from a ship that won't arrive for months.
And this is the central problem for the authorities. In Mexico City, on October 24th, 1593, Governor Dasmariñas is still officially, and in every way that matters, alive and well.
There's no internet, no telegraph. The Pacific Ocean is a total information blackout zone.
Right. So what do? Do they just laugh at him? Do they think he's a drunk or a madman?
They don't laugh, do they?
They do not laugh. This is the late 16th century. The Spanish Empire is deeply, profoundly religious and just as profoundly paranoid.
And the Inquisition is a major power.
The Holy Office, the Inquisition, is an incredibly powerful force in Mexico. When they see a man appear out of thin air, claiming to travel 9,000 miles in a second, they don't think science fiction. They think demonology.
That makes perfect sense. If God moves people, it's a miracle, a holy vision. If you move yourself without a clear, holy explanation, it's witchcraft.
Precisely. The internal logic of the Inquisition was that the devil has powers of transportation. They had a word for it. Transvection. It was the idea that witches and warlocks could fly through the air to attend the Sabbath.
So Gil Pérez isn't treated as a marvel or a mystery. He's treated as a threat, a spiritual contaminant.
Exactly. He is immediately arrested.
And what are the specific charges they levy against him?
Well, technically he's a deserter because he's not at his post in Manila, which is a military crime.
Okay, that one makes sense from their perspective.
But the much heavier, much more dangerous charge is being a servant to the devil. They throw him in jail. Some accounts say it was the Cárcel de Perpetua in Mexico City. Others suggest he was moved around. But the bottom line is he's locked up.
I did read this one detail in the Esquire article, which was a great summary of the modern take on this, that he actually kind of preferred the Mexican jail.
Yes, it's such a humanizing, almost humorous footnote to this story. He reportedly told his jailers that he'd rather be in a cell in Mexico than back fighting in the jungles of the Philippines.
It gives us a glimpse into his personality, doesn't it?
It really does. It suggests he wasn't a raving lunatic or a religious zealot. He was just a tired soldier who was maybe just a little bit relieved to be off duty, even if off duty meant facing the Inquisition.
So he sits in jail.
Yeah.
And now the clock starts ticking. The entire validity of his life and whether he gets, burned at the stake or set free, it all depends on whether his impossible story checks out.
They need verification. And in 1593, verification comes at the speed of a galleon ship. And we really need to talk about what that means when you talk about the Torniaje, the return trip.
This is a part of history I feel like we just skipped over in school. We hear about the Manila galleons going back and forth. But we don't really grasp how unbelievably hard it was to get back to Mexico from Asia.
It was a navigator's nightmare. You couldn't just sail east. The trade winds and the currents were against you. It was impossible.
So what did they do?
A friar named Andrés de Urdaneta figured it out. You had to sail north from the Philippines, way north, all the way up towards the coast of Japan to catch the Kuroshio current, the black current.
Okay.
This powerful current would then sweep you across the vast, empty northern Pacific, sometimes as far north as what we now call the California or Oregon coast, before you could finally turn south and limp your way down to Acapulco.
That sounds incredibly long and dangerous.
It took 4 to 6 months on a good run, sometimes longer. The ships were often called black ships, partly because the pitch used to seal the wood would turn dark, but also because of the horrific death toll.
From what?
Scurvy was rampant. Storms in the North Pacific were monstrous. Starvation, disease. It was one of the most dangerous sea voyages on the planet.
So when we say they waited for news, we mean they were waiting for a battered, exhausted, half-dead ship to hopefully limp its way into port after half a year at sea.
That is exactly what they were waiting for.
Sure.
And 2 months later, which is actually remarkably fast, suggesting a ship might have left almost immediately after the assassination with the news, a Manila galleon finally arrives in Acapulco.
This is it, the moment of truth for Gil Pérez.
It's the moment of truth for everyone. The officials in Mexico go to meet the ship, they break the official seals on the dispatches from the Philippines, and there it is in black and white ink.
The news.
The news. Governor Gómez Pérez Dasmariñas was assassinated by his Chinese rowers on October 23, 1593. The details match Gil Pérez's story perfectly. The date, the method, everything.
That has to be a spine-chilling moment for the viceroy, for the inquisitors.
It completely upends their entire understanding of reality. Their neat little box of what's possible and what's demonic just got smashed. But there is one more piece of evidence, according to the legend.
Okay.
A passenger on that very galleon steps off the boat. He sees Gil Pérez, who is perhaps being transferred or is just known to the authorities by now, and he recognizes him.
The witness.
The witness. This passenger swears an oath before the authorities. He says, I saw this man. I saw this man in Manila on October 23rd. I saw him with the Guardia Civil just before I boarded my ship.
Okay, I have to push back here a little bit. That feels a little too convenient, doesn't it? A random passenger. Do we know who this guy was? Or is this just one of those details that gets added to the story later on to make it sound more watertight?
That is an excellent question. And that question brings us to the most important part of this entire deep dive. The source analysis.
The paper trail.
The paper trail. Because the convenient witness absolutely appears in the later, more folkloric versions of the story. When we start to look at the contemporary records, things get a little murkier and a lot more interesting.
So let's peel back the layers. We have the popular legend, soldier teleports, gets jailed, ship arrives, witness confirms, soldier is released and sent home. It's a nice, tidy narrative.
But history is never tidy.
No, it's messy. So to really understand if this actually happened, we have to look at when the different parts of the story were written down. Let's work backwards from the present day.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's start with the most basic thing, the name. Gil Pérez. Where does that name even come from?
Okay, this. Would you believe the name Gil Pérez does not appear anywhere in the historical record until the year 1908?
Wait, what? Seriously? So for more than 300 years, he was just the anonymous teleporting soldier?
Correct. The name comes from an American writer and folklorist named Thomas Allibone John Vere. He wrote a piece for Harper's Magazine called Legends of the Living Spectre.
A great title.
It is a great title. And John Vere was a fantastic storyteller, but that's what he was doing, retelling a folk tale. He very likely invented or assigned the soldier a common Spanish name to make the story more compelling and personal for a 20th century American audience.
That is a huge red flag for historical accuracy, but I have to admit, it's a great move for storytelling. It makes him a person, not just a strange plot device.
Exactly. Protagonist needs a name. Now, John Vere was basing his work on a Mexican folklorist from the late 19th century named Luis González Obregón.
Okay, so one step back in time.
Right. Obregón wrote a wonderful book called Mexico Viejo, which was a collection of historical traditions, legends, and customs. He tells the story, and he treats it as a well-known folk tale in Mexico City, but he refers to the protagonist simply as un aparecido.
Which means?
An apparition, or one who appeared.
So in 1900, he's an anonymous ghost. By 1908, he's Gil Pérez. Fascinating. Let's go back further. What about the religious accounts you mentioned?
Now we step back another century, to 1698. This is roughly 100 years after the event itself. A Spanish friar named Gaspar de San Agustín writes a massive history called Conquistas de las Islas Filipinas.
The conquest of the Philippine Islands.
Right. And in this very serious historical work, he recounts the story as absolute, undeniable fact. He totally believes it happened.
Okay, so what is his explanation? Does he think it was a miracle from God, a saintly intervention?
No. Which is really interesting. San Agustín was very much a man of his time. He attributes the transport directly to witchcraft.
So the devil again.
Explicitly. He suggests that the soldier was carried through the air by witches or by the devil himself. He writes about aerial transport as a known demonic capability. For him, the story wasn't really about a soldier's strange plight. It was a cautionary tale about the very real power of the dark arts.
And again, I have to ask, does he name the soldier?
No. In 1698, he is still just a soldier, a nameless pawn in a demonic plot.
Okay, so we have a nameless soldier in 1698, transported by witches, but we're still a century away from the actual event. Is there anything closer? Is there anyone who was actually alive in 1593 who wrote about this?
Yes. And this This is the holy grail of this entire mystery. We have to talk about Antonio de Morga.
Okay, who is he? Why is he so important?
Antonio de Morga was not just a writer or a friar. He was the lieutenant governor of the Philippines. He was a high-ranking judge, an oidor of the Royal Audiencia, which was like the Supreme Court of the colony. This man was a serious, rigid, legalistic colonial official.
So not a guy prone to flights of fancy.
The exact opposite. He published his history, Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, in the year 1609.
1609, that's only 16 years after the assassination. He was there. He would have known the people involved.
He was there, and in his book, he describes the assassination of Governor Dasmariñas in meticulous legalistic detail. He confirms the date, October 23rd, and then he writes something that sends shivers down the spine of anyone who studies this.
What does he say?
He writes, as a matter of fact, that the news of the governor's death was known in Mexico on the same day that it happened.
He puts that in writing. A high-ranking legal official puts that in a history book.
He does, but, and this is the absolute pivot point of the entire legend, he then claims complete ignorance as to how the rumor spread. He does not mention a soldier. He does not mention a teleporting guard. He simply records that, quote, people in the Plaza of Mexico knew of the death on the same day, and that it was a total mystery how the information could have traveled so fast.
That is fascinating. So the kernel of truth at the heart of this legend isn't the man, Gil Pérez.
No.
The kernel of truth is the impossible information transfer.
Exactly. Morga basically says, we don't know how they knew, but they knew. It's a blank space in the historical record, a gap. And human beings, we hate gaps. We hate mysteries.
We have to fill them.
We have to fill them. So over the next 100 years, folklore and storytelling filled that gap. The question, how did the news get there so fast, became maybe someone brought it, which then evolved into maybe a soldier brought it, which in a deeply religious and superstitious age became maybe a soldier was flown by witches.
Which, centuries later, in a more romantic age, becomes the legend of a specific man named Gil Pérez who teleported.
It's the ultimate game of historical telephone. The core fact, impossibly fast news, seems to be recorded by a contemporary source. The elaborate explanation is the legend that grew around it.
And you see this pattern in literature, too. It's not a totally unique idea. Washington Irving, the guy who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, he has a story in Tales of the Alhambra called Governor Manco and the Soldier.
And it's almost the exact same plot. A soldier is magically transported over a long distance to deliver a message. It's a classic folkloric trope.
Even Jose Rizal, the national hero of the Philippines, he touched on this, didn't he?
He did. Rizal was brilliant, a true polymath. He found and annotated Morga's history in the British Museum in the late 1800s. And in his notes, he pointed out that the Spanish Philippines was a place where the line between reality and miracle was incredibly thin. He noted that these kinds of miraculous stories were prevalent because the society was so isolated, so religious, so steeped in that kind of thinking.
Okay, so we have the paper trail. We have the clear evolution from a historical mystery to a full-blown myth. But I want to go back to Morga's original claim. They knew on the same day. Let's put on our skeptic hats. Even if we accept he wrote that, how is that actually possible? Is there any kind of logical, non-supernatural explanation?
There are a few theories that people have put forward. The most boring one involves calendars and bad bookkeeping. Yeah. Record keeping in the 16th century wasn't always perfectly synchronized across a global empire. It's possible that there was a confusion of dates in the official logs. Maybe the assassination happened a day earlier, or the arrival of the news in Mexico was recorded a day later. And in the retelling, the dates got smashed together to create a one-day miracle.
The clerical error theory, it's dull, but I guess it's plausible.
It is. Another slightly more exciting theory is the fast ship hypothesis. Meaning, maybe a very small, very fast ship, not a big lumbering galleon, left the Philippines immediately after the news broke. Maybe it caught a freakishly perfect set of winds and currents. Maybe it made the crossing in record time, say, 3 months instead of the usual 4 or 5.
But Morga says the same day, not 3 months later, which was impressively fast.
True. But human memory is a very malleable thing. Imagine you're in the Plaza Mayor in Mexico City. A ship arrives with this shocking news. The governor is dead. It feels like a bombshell that just dropped out of the sky. Years later, when you tell this story, you might say, I remember. It was so sudden, it was like we knew it the very moment it happened.
So the emotional impact of the news compresses the timeline in your memory.
Exactly. The feeling of immediacy becomes reported as a fact of immediacy over time. That's a very common psychological phenomenon.
That makes a lot of sense. But then we have to look at the other side, the high strangeness side. Because even with all the skepticism in the world, the story persists for a reason.
It does. It captures the imagination.
So let's talk about the theories that don't involve clerical errors or bad memory. What did the paranormal researchers say about Gil Pérez?
Well, this is where it gets really fun. In the 20th century, we just swapped out the old explanations for new ones. We swapped witches for aliens.
Of course.
A UFO researcher in the 1950s named Morris K. Jessup, he became fascinated with this case. He and others like Brinsley Crench, who was actually the 8th Earl of Clancarty, a member of the House of Lords who believed in UFOs.
Wow, okay.
They suggested alien abduction.
The idea being that Gil Pérez was just scooped up by a UFO in Manila and then unceremoniously dropped off in Mexico City.
That's the theory. It explains the missing time. It explains his disorientation. It explains the physical transport without any kind of known vessel. They argue that whatever technology was used was simply so far beyond the comprehension of a 16th century mind that they had to default to the only supernatural explanation they had.
Which was the devil.
Which was the devil. It's a perfect example of Arthur C. Clarke's famous rule. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Or, in this case, indistinguishable from demonology.
Precisely. And then you fast forward to today and you have the modern internet theory, the glitch in the matrix.
I see this on Reddit threads all the time whenever this story comes up. The idea that reality is just a simulation and Gil Pérez accidentally clicked through the map.
It's a compelling metaphor for our digital age, isn't it? He hit a loading error in the Manila server and then just respawned at the default point in the Mexico server.
It's fun, but it's really just folklore evolving again.
It's exactly that. We use the language and the metaphors of our time to explain the unexplainable. In 1698, the most advanced mysterious concept was witches' flight. In 1950, it was flying saucers. In 2024, it's computer code.
But all of these theories, from the devil to aliens to computer bugs, they all circle back to that one undeniable, stubborn fact from Antonio de Morga.
They do.
The information traveled too fast.
That is what keeps me up at night regarding this story. Morga was a judge. He dealt in evidence and sworn testimony. He was not a fabulist. So if he, in his official capacity, admits the rumor outpaced the ships, that is a significant historical anomaly. It suggests that our understanding of how communication worked in the pre-modern world might be, well, it might be missing something.
Or maybe that the human grapevine, that unofficial network of rumor and gossip, is just way more powerful and faster than we give it credit for.
Or that. That is also a very real possibility.
So let's try to wrap this all up. We have a story that connects two incredibly distant colonies of a global empire. We have a poor, exhausted soldier who unwittingly became the patron saint of teleportation. What is the big takeaway here?
For me, the takeaway is about the human relationship with distance and isolation. In that era, we were terrified of being far away from home. We were terrified of the unknown that lay across the ocean. The story of Gil Pérez is a kind of wish fulfillment fantasy.
Oh, so.
It's the deep-seated dream that we could just close our eyes and instantly be somewhere else. Be home, be safe, avert the months of danger on the sea.
It's the ultimate commuter fantasy, like we said at the start. No more traffic.
Exactly. But it's also a powerful testament to the power of the written word and storytelling. A vague, mysterious rumor recorded in 1609 became a concrete, named legend by 1908 because people wrote it down, and each generation added its own layer of detail, its own explanation. We're literally watching a myth build itself in real time over centuries of documentation.
It really makes you wonder what myths we're building right now, what stories we're telling, that people will be deconstructing in another 400 years.
Absolutely. The glitch in the matrix might be the 25th century's witchcraft.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We spent this time deconstructing the story, taking it apart, looking at the dates and the authors. But I keep going back to Gil Pérez, or whatever his real name was, sitting in that cold jail cell in Mexico City.
Why that particular moment?
Because in that moment, he was innocent. He was telling the absolute truth as he experienced it. And because he told a truth that nobody's reality could accommodate, he was locked up. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes reality is stranger, more complex than the systems we've built to understand and police it.
And that history is absolutely full of these little footnotes, these little anomalies that, if you just look closely enough, open up into entire worlds of mystery.
Exactly. So here's the final thought. If Antonio de Morga, a serious, stiff upper lip historian and judge writing in 1609, admitted that Mexico knew of the governor's death on the same day but couldn't explain how, What other impossible historical footnotes have we dismissed just because we didn't have a convenient name like Gil Pérez attached to them?
That is the question, isn't it? How many other glitches are hiding in the margins?
Thanks for taking the deep dive with us. This was a wild one.
It really was. See you on the next one.